My friend Noah and I had planned the Montana trip for months. We both worked desk jobs, stuck in city traffic and cubicles most days, and we needed a break. Something real, something raw. We picked a 2-day loop trail deep in the Absaroka-Beartooth Wilderness, packed our gear, and hit the road on a Friday morning. The weather was good, cool air, clear skies, no storms in the forecast. We drove 6 hours up into the mountains and parked at a small, empty trailhead. No other cars. That was the first thing I noticed. We hiked for most of the day, taking our time. The trail was rugged in places, but nothing we couldn't handle. The further we got, the more isolated it felt. Tall pines closed in on both sides of the trail, and every now and then we'd stop to listen. Just wind, birds, the occasional snap of branches under some animal's feet. Around late afternoon, we reached a small alpine lake surrounded by trees and rocky slopes. It looked like something off a postcard, calm water, complete silence, the kind of place you only see after hours of hiking. We decided to make camp there. We found a flat patch of ground just a few dozen feet from the shoreline, cleared the area, and pitched the tent. After setting up, we made dinner. Dehydrated meals heated over a little stove, and watched the sunset from a big rock overlooking the water. The sky turned deep orange, then purple, then dark. No light pollution, no distant cars, no planes. Just stars and the faint sound of water lapping against the shore. By 9, the temperature dropped. We zipped ourselves into the tent, packed our food in a bear canister, and stashed it well away from camp, like we were supposed to. We both had good sleeping bags and layers on, and I fell asleep fast. It was one of those deep, quiet mountain sleeps where everything feels calm, like nothing could bother you up there. Then sometime around 1 a.m., I woke up. At first, I wasn't sure why. Everything was quiet. I lay still, listening. The air inside the tent felt cold against my face. Then I heard it, a soft, slow sound, a zipper, our tent's zipper. I didn't move. My eyes were wide open, staring into the darkness. It was faint, but unmistakable. The sound of the zipper pulling down, slow, deliberate. I turned my head just slightly toward the tent entrance. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear it. Then it stopped. Halfway, I looked at Noah. He was on his side, back to the door, breathing slow and steady, still asleep. I reached out, slow as I could, feeling for the little pocket knife I kept beside my sleeping bag. My hand brushed it. I grabbed it tight and didn't make a sound. Then I heard footsteps. Not animal footsteps, these were slow, steady, deliberate, crunching lightly in the pine needles and dirt. Someone was walking around the tent. No flashlight, no whispering, just footsteps. They moved from the front of the tent, where the zipper was, around the side. Not fast, like they were inspecting it. I held my breath. I thought about yelling, thought about lunging forward and slamming my hand against the tent wall to scare them off. But something about how slow they were moving, how confident, it didn't feel like someone who was scared of being caught. It felt like someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The steps circled halfway, then stopped. I waited, my ears strained in the silence. Then nothing. No more footsteps, no more zipper, just the wind, faint through the trees. I stayed frozen for a long time. I didn't dare move. I didn't sleep at all. I lay there in the darkness, holding that knife, staring up at the ceiling of the tent, heart thudding in my chest. At some point, maybe around 4 or 5, the first pale light started filtering through the tent fabric. It was almost morning. Noah stirred beside me, stretched, groaned. "You up?" he mumbled. I didn't answer right away. I slowly unzipped the sleeping bag and sat up. "Something happened last night," I finally said, my voice low. He looked at me, confused. "What do you mean?" I didn't want to say much until we were outside. I told him I heard something, someone, and grabbed my boots. We stepped out of the tent just as the first sunlight hit the trees. The lake was still, a thin mist hovering above the surface. The air was freezing. Our boots crunched on frost-covered grass. That's when I saw them, small boot prints, circling the tent. Just one loop, like someone walked around it and then left. I pointed them out. Noah crouched and looked closer. They weren't big, maybe a men's size 8 or 9. Could have been a woman. The treads were faint but clear enough to tell they were boots, not sneakers. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then I walked around the back of the tent. There was something scratched into the nylon. 3 words. Why lock it? The letters were rough, jagged, like someone had used a knife or a sharp rock. About a foot across, right above where our sleeping bags had been. Not huge, but not small either. It hadn't torn the fabric all the way through, but it was deep enough to leave marks. I just stood there staring at it. My skin felt cold all over, even in the sunlight. Noah walked up behind me and saw it too. He didn't make a sound. We didn't eat breakfast. We didn't boil coffee or repack our gear neatly like we usually would. We shoved everything into our packs in silence. I kept looking over my shoulder, scanning the trees. Nothing moved, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever had been out there was still nearby, watching. We didn't speak much on the hike back. We moved fast, faster than we normally would with full packs. The entire trail felt different in the daylight, more open, less threatening. But I still jumped at every noise. A squirrel darting through the underbrush, a branch snapping in the wind. We reached the car by mid-afternoon. Still no other vehicles at the trailhead. Not a single one. That meant whoever came to our tent didn't hike in from the trailhead like we did. Either they'd come from deeper in the woods, or they lived out there, or they followed us in. We threw our packs in the trunk and didn't look back. The drive down the mountain was silent until we hit cell service again. I got a signal and checked the local news. Nothing. No missing hikers. No alerts. No recent crimes in the area. We never reported it. What would we even say? No one stole anything. No one hurt us. But someone had found our tent, opened the zipper halfway, walked around us in the dark, and scratched a message into the back. That was it. Just a message. We didn't go on another trip for a while after that. Months, maybe a year. When we finally did, we chose spots with other campers, trail rangers, people nearby. We never camped that deep in the wilderness again. And we never forgot what that scratch said. Why lock it? I was hiking in Vermont, a quiet solo trip to clear my head for a few days. I'd taken the main loop trail that morning, the kind that's clearly marked and easy to follow, with weathered wooden signs nailed into trees every half mile or so. I'd started early, just after sunrise, and planned to do a wide loop through the forest and back to my car by evening. I packed light, just a small gray backpack with water, some snacks, a first aid kit, and my phone, though I knew signal would be useless in most parts of this trail. By noon, I was deep into the woods, far from any road or ranger post. The sun filtered through the trees in narrow beams, and I barely saw anyone after the first hour. It was the kind of quiet that's almost too quiet. No wind, no birdsong, just the soft crunch of my boots over the dry trail and the occasional rustle of leaves when I brushed against them. Around 1:30, I came to a fork in the trail. The official trail veered to the right, as marked by a faded wooden arrow. But to the left, barely visible behind a cluster of brush, was another path. It didn't look like part of the main loop. Overgrown, steeper, narrower, but someone had marked it. Thin strips of blue and orange ribbon tied around branches and saplings every 20 feet or so. I hesitated, took a drink of water, then figured it might be a side route. I'd seen hikers do things like that before, marking unofficial paths to viewpoints or backcountry campsites. I stepped off the main trail and started following the ribbons. Almost immediately, the terrain got rougher. The ground sloped upward at a steady angle, and the path, if you could even call it that, was full of roots and loose rocks. The air was still and hot in that part of the forest. I ducked under branches, stepped over down trees, and pushed aside clusters of brambles that hadn't been trimmed in years, if ever. The ribbons kept showing up, so I kept going. I figured it'd lead somewhere, a campsite, an overlook, maybe even back to the main trail eventually. I hiked for about an hour and a half. My shirt was soaked with sweat, and the straps of my backpack had started rubbing raw spots into my shoulders. Just when I was about to turn back, I saw a clearing up ahead. It was small, maybe 20 feet across, completely silent. At the far end of the clearing was a wooden structure. Calling it a shelter would have been generous. It looked like someone had thrown it together in a weekend out of whatever scrap wood they could find. It was leaning slightly to one side, and the roof sagged in the middle. The front was half open. No door, just a wide dark entrance like a mouth. The wood was gray and cracked, the nails rusted orange. I could see broken glass littering the ground around it, and a few rusted food cans stacked in the corner, their labels faded or gone completely. I stood there for a minute, just looking at it. Something felt off. It wasn't just abandoned. It felt wrong, like it had been left in a hurry and never touched again. I stepped closer. The air around it was thick and still. No birds, no insects, just my own breathing. Inside, it was dark but not pitch black. Enough light came through the slats in the walls to see the layout. There was a mattress on the floor, stained dark in places. The kind of stains you don't want to think too hard about. Next to it was a plastic crate with some old clothes crumpled inside. One hiking boot, a cracked plate, a few water bottles with yellowed plastic. But what caught my eye was the backpack. It was old, faded green, sitting against the back wall. It looked like it hadn't been moved in years. One of the zippers was broken, and the front pocket hung open. I leaned down and saw a notebook inside, spiral-bound with a torn cover. I pulled it out carefully. At first I thought it was a journal, but the writing was too neat, too organized. The pages were filled with short lines, dates, times, and brief descriptions. April 4 to 1:12 p.m., red jacket, male, alone. May 12 to 4:50 p.m. couple, both with trekking poles, stopped at fork. Dozens of entries like that, all hikers, all details. I flipped to the most recent page. Today, gray backpack, solo, 3 p.m., turned east. That was me. I stood there frozen for a few seconds, trying to understand what I was looking at. The handwriting was steady, clean, and recent. It didn't make sense. Someone had been watching hikers, writing down everything, and they had seen me. They had seen me today. I looked at my watch. 3:27 p.m. I backed out of the shelter and looked around. Nothing but trees. No sound. No movement. I didn't know what I was expecting to see. Maybe someone hiding, watching, but the forest looked the same as it had all day. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, like eyes were on me from just beyond the tree line. I turned to head back the way I came, and that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There were no ribbons. I walked 10 steps, then 20. Nothing. No bright blue or orange markers tied to the trees. I started scanning the branches more carefully, walking slower. Still nothing. I turned in a slow circle, trying to get my bearings. Everything looked the same. Just trees, brush, and steep sloping ground in all directions. I pulled my phone out to check GPS, but as expected, there was no signal, and the maps weren't loading. I had maybe 60% battery left. Not enough to risk keeping the screen on constantly. For a second, I considered going back to the shelter, trying to get a clearer sense of direction from where I came, but I couldn't make myself walk back toward it. I just couldn't. Instead, I picked the direction I thought I'd come from and started moving, trying to retrace my steps. I looked for broken branches, footprints, anything familiar. The hike back was slow and panicked. I must have walked in circles at least twice. The terrain all looked the same, dense and overgrown, full of false paths and dead ends. Hours passed. The sun started to drop behind the hills, and the light grew thin and golden. I hadn't brought a flashlight. I hadn't planned to be out this late. Just as I started to consider hunkering down and waiting for morning, I saw something in the distance. Straight lines, pale wood, and a flat surface. A trail sign. My heart jumped. I walked faster, almost stumbling. When I reached it, I nearly cried with relief. It was one of the official signs from the main loop, marked with mileage and directions. I was back. I didn't stop walking. I followed the main trail as fast as I could without falling. As I walked, I started noticing more ribbons, blue and orange, tied along the edge of the trail here and there, not near the turnoff, but deeper in. Subtle. Easy to miss if you weren't looking. That made me furious. Someone had done that on purpose, lured people off the trail, marked a path that went nowhere useful, just deeper into the woods, right to that shelter, and then no way back. On the way out, I tore every ribbon I saw off the branches. I yanked them down, crushed them in my fist, and stuffed them in my backpack. Blue, orange, faded or fresh. I pulled them all. I don't know how many I found, but it felt like dozens. It was like a trail had been built just for the purpose of leading people off the map. I made it back to my car just after dark. I didn't sit, didn't eat, didn't even change out of my boots. I just drove, fast and focused, until I hit the next town. I found a gas station with lights and people and cell service. I stayed in my car for almost an hour before I felt steady enough to check into a motel. I didn't report it. I don't know why. Maybe I was afraid no one would believe me, or that they'd go out there and find nothing but a broken down shack and an empty notebook. Maybe I didn't want to explain why I went off trail, why I followed the ribbons. But I know what I saw, and if anyone else finds that path, I hope they stop before they follow it too far. I hope they turn back before they see the shelter, before someone writes about them in that notebook. I still have the ribbons in a box in my closet. I don't know why I kept them. Maybe to remind myself how lucky I got. Maybe just so I know they're not out there anymore, waiting to lead someone else in. It was my second day hiking through the Smoky Mountains, early spring, just cool enough that the mornings felt sharp but warm enough that the sun on your back during the day made you sweat. I had started early that morning, aiming to get a solid stretch in before the rain they were predicting for later. The trail was quiet, not a single person around. I liked it that way. No small talk, no awkward passing. Just me, the trees, and the sound of my boots pressing into the soft dirt. Around mid-morning, I came to a part of the trail that curved around a rocky slope, dipped slightly, and flattened out next to a mossy clearing. A big fallen log rested just off the path. As I stepped over a root, I caught my foot on something soft under the leaves. I stumbled but didn't fall. I looked down, thinking it was a bundle of leaves or maybe an old jacket someone lost. I crouched and brushed the wet leaves away with the side of my boot. That's when I saw the edge of a blue plastic tarp. It was crusted with dirt and folded weird, like something was wrapped in it. I hesitated before crouching fully to get a better look. I tugged at the corner of the tarp and it moved easily. Underneath it was a backpack, partially buried under wet earth and leaves. Someone had clearly hidden it. The zippers were mud-caked, the nylon fabric faded and worn. It didn't look like it had been out there long, weeks maybe, not months. I pulled it free, brushed off what I could, and unzipped the main compartment. Inside were clothes, damp, bunched up, smelling of mildew and earth. There was a faded hoodie, a pair of sweatpants, socks, even a small towel. Stuffed down along the bottom was a cheap flip phone with a spiderweb of cracks across the screen. It was dead. I checked the side pocket and found a disposable camera, the old kind you wind with your thumb, the little window showing it was used up. It wasn't my business, but something about it felt off. People lose things in the woods all the time, sure, but this felt hidden, buried, not dropped. I stood up and scanned the woods around me. Nothing moved, just quiet trees and the sound of birds overhead. I set the backpack on the log and took a few pictures of it with my own phone, just in case. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but it felt like something I shouldn't just leave. I carried the backpack with me the rest of the hike. It wasn't far to the next ranger station, maybe 5 miles. My pace slowed with the added weight, but I didn't stop to rest. The whole time, I kept thinking about who had left it, why it was hidden, what was on the camera. When I reached the station in the early afternoon, I explained what I'd found to the ranger on duty and handed everything over. He didn't say much, just nodded, asked where exactly I found it, wrote it all down in a small logbook. I asked if there had been any reports of missing hikers. He didn't answer that directly, just told me they'd look into it. That night, I stayed in town at a cheap roadside inn. I couldn't get the backpack out of my mind. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I went into one of the little drugstores on Main Street and asked the woman at the counter if they still developed film. She pointed me to a little machine in the back. Took about an hour. I sat in my car the whole time, watching people walk by, sipping bad coffee from a gas station. When the photos were ready, I took them out to the car and flipped through them slowly. Most were exactly what you'd expect from someone hiking solo. Trees, mossy rocks, campfire smoke curling up into the dusk sky, a squirrel on a stump. Some selfies. The person who took them looked young, early 20s, dark curly hair pulled back under a beanie. They smiled in a few, held up a fish in one, set up their little tent near a stream. But the last 3 photos stopped me. The first was a blurry shot of a sleeping bag taken from a distance. The camera had clearly zoomed in. It was grainy and off-center. No face, just the lump of someone inside the bag. The second was taken closer, still at night. A flashlight must have been used, because the middle of the image was lit while the edges were swallowed in shadow. You could see the tent flap open, someone's leg partially outside the sleeping bag. Again, no face. The third was a close-up of a face. Someone sleeping, mouth slightly open, eyes closed, hair spread out on a pillow or maybe bundled clothing. The flash had blown out the center of the picture, making the skin look pale and almost colorless. But you could clearly see the features. Peaceful, vulnerable. In the corner of the print, the timestamp read 3 days before I found the backpack. I stared at that photo for a long time. It made my stomach turn. Someone had taken that picture in the middle of the night while the person was asleep. Whoever took it had gotten close. Way too close. There was no way the person in the sleeping bag would have slept through a flash like that. I put the photos back in the envelope, drove straight to the ranger station, and handed them over. I expected questions, maybe even a formal report or someone taking my name again. But all the guy at the desk said was they'd add it to the file. He didn't even look through the photos while I was there. I waited a moment, thinking he'd say more. He didn't. I asked if they knew who the person was in the pictures. He just said, flat, "We're looking into it." I left the station feeling worse than when I'd gone in. It was like handing over something important and watching it disappear into a black hole. Back at the motel, I pulled out my phone and looked through the shots I'd taken of the bag when I first found it. I zoomed in on the tag, the dirt-smeared zipper pulls, the pattern on the hoodie inside. Every detail made me feel like I'd stumbled into something I shouldn't have. I did a few internet searches, missing persons in the Smokies, recent disappearances, anything, but nothing came up that matched. No names, no faces that looked like the one I'd seen in the photo. Days passed. I called the station once, but they didn't give me any updates. Said it was still under review. I know what I saw. Someone had been out there alone. They had taken a disposable camera with them. They took normal photos until someone else, someone uninvited, found their camp. Got close enough to photograph them sleeping. Not once, multiple times. And then they were gone. Their backpack buried under leaves. Their phone smashed. I still think about it sometimes when I'm on a trail alone, especially when the sun's going down and the woods start closing in around you. I wonder what the ranger meant by, "We're looking into it." I wonder if they actually did, or if there are more sleeping bags out there, more photos no one was ever meant to see. I was hiking a loop trail in New Hampshire, late October, well past the busy season. The last real crowd I'd seen was in early September. Most people were done with the mountains by then. Too cold, too unpredictable, too empty. And that's exactly what I liked. I liked having the trails to myself. I liked the quiet. No people, no noise, just the steady crunch of my boots, the wind in the trees, and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. I parked my car at the small gravel lot around 8 a.m. Only vehicle there. The loop I picked wasn't too intense, about 10 miles total, with a few steep parts and some pretty remote sections that wound deep into the forest. I layered up, shouldered my pack, and set off. The first few miles were peaceful. Everything was damp. Fallen leaves were wet from the overnight frost melt, and the trail was soft in some places, muddy in others. The woods were beautiful, mostly maple and beech, their branches mostly bare now. Patches of fog still clung to the hollows. I remember thinking it felt like walking through an old photograph. About 4 miles in, I saw something that stopped me. It was a massive tree, an old pine bigger around than anything else nearby. Nailed to the trunk was a mirror, a square mirror about the size of a flat-screen TV. The glass was spotless. It caught the dull light filtering through the branches and reflected the forest perfectly, like a window to a copy of the world I was already in. I stood in front of it for a while. I don't know how long. It was strange, yeah, but not terrifying. Just odd. Who hauls something like that out here? And why? It looked too clean, too deliberate. No scratches, no graffiti. Just there. Eventually, I kept moving. I glanced behind me once or twice, feeling a bit stupid. I wasn't scared, exactly, but my brain didn't know what to do with that kind of weird, so it kept chewing on it. About 30 minutes later, I saw another one. Same kind of tree, thick, towering pine. Same mirror, same size, same placement. But this one was cracked. One long split diagonally across the glass, as if someone had punched it with a rock or hit it with something blunt. The reflection was still there, but distorted, warped slightly in the crack. The hair on my arms stood up. Something about that broke the illusion. The first one felt like art. This felt like a warning. The air felt colder there. I don't know if it actually was, or if I was just more aware of everything. My breathing, the distant creak of trees shifting in the wind, the subtle sound of something dropping into the underbrush to my left. I didn't see anything, but I kept walking, a little faster. The loop turned sharply east after that, climbing steadily up a ridge. The trail got narrower, steeper. I stopped for water near a moss-covered boulder and checked my phone. No signal, which wasn't surprising. I hadn't seen a single person all day. No other hikers, no old boot prints, not even litter. Just forest. Cold, quiet forest. On the way down the other side of the ridge, I saw the third mirror. This one was shattered. It hung crooked on the tree, one corner dangling like the nail had pulled loose. The glass was broken into a spiderweb of pieces, most of them still held together by the frame, but some had fallen to the base of the tree. I almost didn't stop, but I did. I looked at the pieces. One shard still reflected enough to catch the trail behind me, but it was all fractured, like the forest behind me had been split into a dozen jagged versions of itself. I didn't like how that made me feel. I didn't like how I couldn't stop looking into it, even though every part of my body wanted to keep moving. Something moved behind me. I swear to this day I heard it soft, quick, like a shoe scuffing over damp leaves. But when I turned around, nothing was there. Just empty trail, sloping gently back toward the ridge. I didn't stop again until I hit the final leg of the loop. It was early afternoon, and the sky had turned flat and gray. I was maybe a mile from the trailhead when I saw the fourth mirror. This one was fogged over, like someone had breathed on it. The condensation clung to the glass unevenly, but what stood out was the smear across the middle, like someone had dragged their finger through the fog. Just one swipe, straight line. I don't know why, but that hit me harder than the others. Felt fresh, recent, like someone had just done it. It also meant someone had been close. That mirror couldn't fog like that on its own. Not like that, not in the cold air. Someone had been breathing near it. I stood there too long. Every instinct told me to move, but I couldn't. I kept looking at that swipe, trying to decide how recent it was, trying to listen harder than I ever had before. I couldn't hear anything but my own heartbeat and the wind moving the treetops. Eventually, I forced myself forward. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to see what might be behind me. The forest had changed. Felt like it was watching me. And then I reached the last mirror. It was just off the trailhead, maybe 50 feet before the parking lot came into view. It looked like the first one, perfectly clean, square, centered, but under it, carved directly into the tree bark, were words. You only see what follows you if you look behind you. The letters were deep, jagged, uneven, like they'd been carved with a knife by someone in a hurry. I stood frozen. I didn't look at the mirror. I stared at the carving. My brain was making noise now, like white static. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to see what the mirror showed. I just walked past it, I didn't run. I didn't sprint. But I walked steadily right to my car. I opened the door, got in, and locked it. Then I sat there with the engine off for a few minutes, staring through the windshield, listening. Nothing happened. Nothing jumped out of the woods. No one followed me down the trail. But I never looked back. I still don't know what those mirrors were for, who put them there, why they were clean or cracked or broken, why they were all on similar trees spaced out along the loop like that. I've checked maps, read forums, looked at trip reports for that trail. Nothing. No one else mentions them. And I haven't hiked alone since. Because even now, even in daylight, even in my apartment, part of me thinks that if I look over my shoulder too fast or catch a reflection the wrong way, I'll see something standing behind me. Something that was following me that day, and maybe still is. I was hiking solo through a trail in Northern California, somewhere in the lower part of the Shasta Trinity area. It was early fall, that sweet spot in late September when the air gets cooler but the days still have that golden warmth. I had started the hike around 9 in the morning. The sky was clear, not a cloud in sight. I had about 6 miles to cover on this loop trail, wooded most of the way with some clearings where the sun broke through the trees. I wasn't in a rush. I had snacks, enough water, and I'd been through parts of this forest before. The plan was to finish up by mid-afternoon, head back to the car, and drive down to a small town about an hour away where I had a motel booked for the night. I was maybe 2 hours in when it happened. The trail curved gently to the right, climbing a little, and I saw something that made me stop. Down the embankment, maybe 15 feet off the trail, just past a clump of dry grass and broken branches, was a figure lying still. Person. My stomach turned. She looked like a young woman, maybe early 20s. She was wearing hiking clothes, a dark green jacket, cargo pants, boots. No movement. I don't know why, but my first thought was that she must have fallen and hit her head, or maybe passed out from dehydration. I scanned the area quickly. No blood that I could see, no sign of struggle. Just her, flat on her back, arms slightly to the side like she had just laid down and never got back up. I called out, "Hey, you okay?" and started to make my way down the slope. It wasn't too steep, but the loose dirt and pine needles made it slippery. I had to grab onto a branch at one point to stop myself from sliding too fast. Still no movement from her. No response. I got closer, maybe 10 feet away. I slowed down. Something about the way she was lying there didn't feel right. Her eyes were closed, and her skin looked pale. Not sickly, just like she'd been lying in the shade too long. I was about to kneel down to check her pulse when she suddenly sat straight up. No warning, no slow stirring, just shot up like something had yanked her by the spine. I froze. My heart jumped into my throat. She turned her head slowly and looked at me, dead in the eye. I'll never forget that look. Not panic, not confusion, not even anger. Just this quiet, cold stare like I had done something wrong. Then, in this flat, almost casual voice, she said, "You shouldn't have stopped. That's all. Just that." I didn't answer. I didn't move at first. I just stared back, too stunned to react. Then, my body caught up to what my brain was screaming, and I backed away, turned, scrambled up the slope without looking back. My legs were shaky, hands covered in dirt. I got back onto the trail and just started walking fast. Not running, but not slow either. Every few steps I looked over my shoulder. She was following me, not right behind, not chasing, just walking, steady, always at a distance, maybe 50 or 60 feet back, sticking to the trail like she knew it better than I did. And every time I turned, she stopped, just stood there staring. No smile, no expression. I thought maybe she needed help but didn't know how to ask. But something deeper told me to just keep moving. I kept walking, faster now, checking over my shoulder more and more. She never got closer, but she never left either. It wasn't a coincidence. I tried stopping at one point, pretending to tie my boot, hoping maybe she'd say something or walk past. She stopped too, stood still, watching. I didn't like how quiet the trail had gotten. No birds, no wind, just the sound of my boots crunching on the dirt and her footsteps echoing faintly behind me. I thought about calling for help, but there was no signal. I checked my phone anyway, 2 bars, then 1, then nothing. Completely dead a second later, like the battery drained all at once. I don't even know how that's possible. It had been nearly full earlier. That made my stomach twist tighter. I passed a small stream that cut across the trail. I crossed it fast, slipping a little on the rocks. She didn't hesitate either, just stepped over it like she'd done it 100 times. No phone, no backpack, no gear. Just her clothes and this empty look in her eyes like nothing mattered anymore. The weirdest thing was that she didn't speak again. Not once, not a sound. Just followed me, calm, quiet, never speeding up, never slowing down. I tried leaving the trail at one point, thinking I could cut through a clearing and maybe lose her. But when I looped back to the main path, she was there again, just further down. Like she knew where I'd end up. That scared me more than anything. Finally, after what felt like hours, I started hearing voices ahead. A couple of hikers were coming from the other direction, talking loud, laughing. I practically ran to them. 2 guys, maybe late 30s, with a dog. They gave me a weird look. I must have looked pale or rattled, but nodded politely as they passed. I glanced behind me. She was gone. Nothing. No movement. Just trees and trail and sunlight breaking through the branches. I turned in circles, searching. She was nowhere. I picked up my pace again, half jogging the rest of the way until I got to a turnout area where a few cars were parked. Mine was still there. I sat inside for a few minutes, doors locked, trying to calm down. Eventually, I drove down to the ranger station, which wasn't far off the main road. I told them what I saw, described the girl, her clothes, the way she was acting. They asked if she had seemed hurt, if she'd said anything else. I told them exactly what she said to me and how she followed me. They pulled up some folders, checked online. No missing person reports that matched her. No hikers reported overdue. No injuries. Nothing. One of the rangers said he'd do a sweep of the area in the morning just in case, but he didn't seem too concerned. People act strangely out there sometimes, he said. The woods get to people. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about the way she looked at me, like I had done something wrong just by noticing her. I kept hearing her voice in my head, quiet but sharp. You shouldn't have stopped. A few days later, after I got home, I checked forums online, local hiker groups, backcountry pages, anything that might explain it. I found a couple of vague stories. People saying they'd seen a woman watching from a distance on that same trail, always alone, always silent. But no names, no solid info, just rumors. One post said the girl never speaks, but she did to me. I don't know what she meant. I don't know if she was trying to warn me or threaten me, or if something else was going on entirely. I just know I'm never hiking alone again. And if I ever see someone lying still on the side of the trail again, I'm not stopping. I'll go straight to the ranger station and let them deal with it. Whatever was happening out there, it felt real, too real. And I still can't shake the feeling that I wasn't supposed to see her. Like by noticing her, I stepped into something I didn't understand, something I still don't. I started helping out with this small online group that tracked wildlife in backcountry areas using motion-activated trail cameras. Nothing official, just a bunch of hobbyists and hikers who were into seeing what animals moved through remote trails when no one was around. People would claim different areas, mount their cameras, and check them every week or so. Then we'd post interesting clips or stills in the group, usually just deer, coyotes, once in a while a bear or mountain lion if you were lucky. I picked a trail up in Wyoming, about 2 hours from where I lived. It wasn't popular with casual hikers. No big views or rivers, just thick lodgepole pine and quiet. That's what made it good for the camera stuff. Animals liked moving through areas with less people. The first time I went out there, I picked a spot about 1.5 miles in. It was just past a bend where the trail split briefly around a rocky section, with one path dipping low through a little ravine and the other staying higher and flatter. I took the lower route and found a tree that gave a good view of where the 2 paths met again. That way, if something moved through either direction, the camera would probably catch it. I strapped the camera up, aimed it slightly downward to avoid the sun triggering it, and set it to record 10-second clips whenever motion was detected. Then I left it alone and didn't think much about it for the rest of the week. 7 days later, I drove back out. The hike in was uneventful, quiet, no footprints except my own from the week before. I swapped out the SD card, checked that the camera was still secured, and hiked back out. It was a simple routine. That night, I got home around 9 p.m. I took a shower, made some food, then sat down with my laptop. I was tired, but curious to see if anything good had shown up. I copied over the files, probably a couple hundred of them. Most of it was empty trail triggered by wind or birds or light changes. But as I scanned through, I started picking out the actual motion clips. A mule deer came through the second night. A small fox sniffed around on night 4. A black bear lumbered by on the 5th morning, maybe 5 a.m. That one was neat. A big male, probably 200 or 300 pounds. But then I reached a clip timestamped at 2:12 a.m., early on the 6th day. I almost skipped it because the thumbnail was too dark to see much. But I clicked anyway, and when the image loaded, I stopped. Right in the middle of the frame was a person. They were crouching, knees drawn up, right in front of the camera, less than 2 feet away. They were completely naked, pale, thin, not dirty, just pale, like their skin didn't see the sun. Their arms hung loose at their sides, and their mouth was open a little. Not wide, not screaming, just slightly open like they were breathing through it. But their eyes, that's what caught me. They were wide, unblinking, almost too open. They were staring directly into the camera lens like they were trying to understand what it was. There was no reaction, no expression, just that fixed look, like they didn't know what the camera was or what it did, but they could feel it watching them, and they were watching back. The clip ended. The next video, same timestamp, was just 10 seconds of the empty trail. I played it again, thinking maybe it was a glitch or a prank. But the image was real. The person's skin looked too detailed, too textured to be a mask or fake. There were goosebumps on their shoulders. I zoomed in and could see faint scars on one forearm. Small ones, thin, healed long ago. They had no shoes, no gear, just crouched there, looking straight ahead. The stillness of their body made it worse. Most people, even if they're standing still, have some movement, shoulders rise and fall, arms shift. This person didn't, like a statue. I didn't sleep well that night. I left my laptop open on the desk and just laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about that crouched figure in the middle of nowhere. I wanted to believe it was some weirdo playing a prank, or maybe a lost hiker with mental issues. But that wouldn't explain why they were naked, or how they found the camera in the first place, or why they just disappeared 1 second later. The next morning, I tried to brush it off. I kept telling myself I should report it in the group, just to let others know. But I didn't. Something about it felt wrong. Not just strange, wrong. Like sharing it would make it more real. Like I'd be inviting something in. But by noon, I was back in my car with my gear packed. I told myself I was just going to check on the camera, make sure no one had messed with it, that maybe the guy had come back and I'd find more clips, and if so, then I'd report it. I had this knot in my stomach the whole drive. The hike in felt different. Not scary exactly, just quiet in a way that felt too quiet. There were no birds, no rustling, just the sound of my own boots on the dirt and the occasional breath I took. I walked fast, trying not to look over my shoulder too much, but every so often I'd stop and turn around just to make sure no one was there. Each time, nothing, just trees. When I got to the bend in the trail, I looked up at the tree where I'd mounted the camera. But it wasn't there. I stopped walking. The strap was still there, neatly folded and laid on the ground right beneath where the camera had been. It hadn't been cut or torn, just unbuckled, coiled into a loop, and placed there like someone had taken the time to do it carefully. I looked around. I didn't touch the strap. I just stood there scanning the trees, trying to spot any movement. But everything stayed still. It didn't feel like a theft. If someone had wanted to steal the camera, they would have just yanked it off and left. Or maybe broken it. This felt like a message, a response. Like whoever had been in that clip had seen the camera, understood it was watching them, and didn't want it to anymore. I stood there for maybe a full minute, not moving. Then I turned around and walked out, fast. Not quite running, but close. I didn't stop again until I was back at my car. I drove home, locked the doors, and just sat on the couch for a long time. I didn't post anything in the group. I didn't message the admin. I didn't even back up the clip. I deleted it. Not because I was scared of someone finding it, but because every time I looked at that person's face, I got this creeping feeling behind my eyes, like I wasn't supposed to be seeing them. Like I was intruding on something I wasn't meant to know existed. I haven't done another trail cam trip since. I left the group a few days later. Someone else took over that stretch of forest, but I never saw any new posts about it. Maybe they moved their camera. Maybe nothing happened to them. Or maybe they saw something too. All I know is I can't stop thinking about that one moment. 2:12 a.m., a quiet forest in Wyoming, and someone crouched naked in front of a camera, staring into it like it was the only thing in the world that mattered. I was hiking solo through the forests near Mount Rainier in late September. The air was crisp, the kind that feels fresh in your lungs, and the leaves were just starting to turn. A mix of orange, red, and gold scattered across the trail. I had picked this loop because it wasn't too popular, but still marked enough to feel safe doing alone. I like that kind of quiet, being out there with nothing but the crunch of dirt and leaves under my boots and the occasional rustle of wind through the tall evergreens. No traffic, no emails, no voices, just silence. I started the hike around 9 in the morning. The trail was about 10 miles round trip with gradual elevation. I had plenty of daylight, and I moved at a steady pace, taking short breaks to drink water and eat trail mix. Around halfway through, maybe close to the 5-mile point, I was standing at a ridge where the forest thinned out just enough to give a glimpse of distant tree-covered slopes. That's when I heard it for the first time. It was a scream, sharp, raw. It didn't sound like someone calling for help. Not the kind of desperate, broken yelling you'd expect from someone lost or injured. It was one long scream, too long, too exact, almost theatrical. Then silence. Not even birdsong after, just dead air. It unsettled me, but I waited, thinking maybe it was some kids goofing off, though I hadn't seen anyone else since the parking lot. A full minute passed, and then it came again. Same scream, same pitch, a little closer. I didn't move at first. I just stood there with my hand hovering near my pack, eyes staring into the trees ahead like I expected something to emerge. But there was nothing, just those endless lines of pine trunks, close together, dark between them. The hair on the back of my neck was standing up. I don't spook easily in the woods. I've done hikes all over the country, even slept solo in backcountry sites. But something about this felt different. The scream was too exact, too controlled. Not like fear, like someone mimicking fear. I reached for my phone out of instinct. No bars, of course. I don't know why I expected anything else out here. I checked my GPS app. Thankfully, it still tracked my location even without service. I was exactly where I should have been on the loop, which gave me a bit of reassurance. I debated continuing, but the scream came again. Closer, same tone, same rhythm, like someone playing a recording on repeat and walking with it. I turned around. I didn't run, but I walked fast, not panicked but alert. My eyes kept scanning the woods to the side of the trail. I had bear spray clipped to the strap of my backpack, and I pulled it off just in case, thumb resting lightly on the trigger. I didn't think it was a bear, though. Bears don't scream like that. Every minute or two, the scream came again. Always a little closer, always the same. It was never directly behind me, always a bit off to the left or right, like it was trying to flank me but never actually making contact. It started to feel less like I was being followed and more like I was being played with, stalked but deliberately with patience, like whoever or whatever was doing it didn't want to catch up, just keep pace and let me know they were there. The forest, usually calming, had turned into something else entirely. Every tree trunk started to look like a hiding place, every fallen branch a trap. I kept walking faster now. My boots thudded hard on the dirt trail, and I was breathing heavier, not from exertion but from the pressure building inside my chest. I kept looking behind me, expecting to see someone, but there was never anyone there. At one point, I thought I saw movement to my left, a flicker of something pale between two trees. I stopped and stared, but it was gone just as fast. I didn't want to stop again. I just wanted to get back to the car. I started jogging. The trail wasn't steep and I had good footing, but I didn't want to twist an ankle or get careless. So I kept my pace careful even as the screams kept coming, always the same. Mechanical, rehearsed. They never got right up close. That's what got under my skin the most. It wasn't that something was chasing me. It was that it could have, but didn't. It was choosing to stay at that same distance, letting me hear it, keeping the pressure on. Eventually, the trail started to widen. I recognized a mossy boulder that I'd passed earlier in the morning. I was getting close to the trailhead. Relief started to creep in until I saw the man. He was walking in, slow and casual, maybe late 60s, wearing an old flannel shirt, worn jeans, and a navy cap pulled low over his face. He had his hands in his jacket pockets and was just making his way up the path like nothing was wrong. I was maybe 20 feet from him when I slowed down, sweat on my forehead, hands still gripping the bear spray tightly. I told him there was something out there, that I'd been hearing screams. My voice cracked a little from how dry my mouth was. He just smiled. This strange, crooked little grin that didn't match the concern I expected. Then he said, "Yeah, he's still out there. That's it. No questions. No worry. Just that." I asked who he meant. I actually repeated the question twice, but he didn't say anything else. He just walked past me, still smiling, still slow, disappearing into the same trees I had just come out of, hands still in his pockets. I turned to watch him go, but he didn't look back, just kept walking. I didn't stick around. I got back to the parking area, which only had two other cars, mine and an old green pickup truck that I figured was probably his. I threw my backpack in the back seat, locked the doors the second I got inside, and sat there for a moment catching my breath. My hands were shaking a little. I turned the key and started driving, not even bothering to check the map again. I just needed to be off that mountain. About 10 minutes down the road, I pulled over to the shoulder and sat there with the engine running, windows up. I needed a moment to come down from the adrenaline. I pulled out my phone again. Still no service. I looked at my GPS app and zoomed out, just looking at where I had been. The trail I took wasn't remote by wilderness standards, but it also wasn't a place you'd just stumble into. You had to drive a long way down rough back roads to get there. And it definitely wasn't the kind of place where you'd expect someone to be messing with hikers, especially with something that felt so rehearsed. I don't know what was out there. Maybe it was some unwell person living off the grid. Maybe someone with a speaker and a twisted sense of fun. Maybe worse. But what stuck with me most wasn't the scream. It was the way that old man smiled. Like it wasn't the first time he'd heard it. Like he knew exactly what I was talking about. Like it had been going on for a long time and no one had done a thing about it. I didn't report it. I don't know why. Maybe I felt stupid. Or maybe I felt like nothing would come of it. I just drove home, and that night I couldn't sleep. Every time the wind moved outside my window, I flinched. Every time the house creaked, I held my breath. That scream was still ringing in my ears. Same pitch, same pattern. I haven't gone hiking alone since.